When the man handed my daughter the baby doll, I thought it was an odd but harmless gesture. "Say thank you," I urged, distracted by the bustling crowd around us. She clutched it tight, grinning ear to ear as we continued home. It wasn't until later, when I saw her playing with the doll on the living room floor, that something caught my eye. I picked it up, turned it over, and felt the blood drain from my face. Once we got home, I started putting away the groceries while my husband took charge in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Our daughter found a spot on the floor with her new baby doll, seemingly in her own little world. I could hear the soft hum of her play, mixing with the clatter of pans and the aroma wafting from the stove. It felt like our usual evening routine, but her attachment to that doll caught my attention. From my spot at the kitchen counter, it was easy to notice how focused she was on the little doll. Her laughter was a musical backdrop to our nightly chaos, bringing smiles to both me and my husband. I turned to him and whispered, "She really loves that doll, doesn't she?" He nodded, chuckling softly as our daughter continued to play happily, lost in her own imagination with her new toy. After dinner was done, I took over the kitchen to clean up, while my husband began the bedtime routine with our daughter. Even as she splashed around in the bath, she refused to let go of the baby doll. "You need both hands to wash up, sweetheart," my husband reminded her gently. Nevertheless, she held on stubbornly, making us exchange amused glances. Her firm grip made me wonder just how attached she'd gotten already. As the night went on, I convinced myself that her attachment was probably normal. Children often latch on to new things quickly, after all. Later, when we finally tucked her into bed, she fell asleep easily, clutching the little doll in her tiny arms. I watched her for a few moments, reassured by the peaceful rise and fall of her chest. Maybe there was nothing to worry about, I thought, heading quietly back to the living room. My husband and I settled on the couch, movie queued up, ready to unwind. Everything seemed typical enough, until a faint clicking noise interrupted us. "Did you hear that?" I asked, narrowing my eyes toward the dark corners of the room. He looked up, shrugging it off. "It's probably just the house settling," he replied, trying to soothe my nerves. Reluctantly, I shook the feeling away and focused back on our movie night. We both laughed it off, diagnosing the sounds as typical old house groans. Houses do settle, that's what people always say, right? So we clicked play and returned our attention to the film, letting the tension float away with the unfolding drama on screen. After all, we had heard house noises before, and nothing ever came of them. I let it go and sank deeper into the couch, trying to enjoy the rest of the evening. The next morning rolled in lazily, breakfast smells filling the home. I was surprised to find that the doll had somehow migrated to the kitchen table overnight. It lay there, strangely out of place amongst the clutter of coffee mugs and cereal boxes. I scratched my head, trying to recall if I or my husband had touched it. "I don't remember moving it," I murmured to myself, feeling a sliver of unease creep in. With my husband already off to work, the house felt strangely quiet as I busied myself. That uneasiness from seeing the doll stubbornly stuck with me. Had I forgotten to put it back, I wondered? Maybe she snuck in and grabbed it when I wasn't looking. These thoughts danced around my mind, creating little ripples of anxiety. I made a mental note to ask her about it later, unsure why it made me so unsettled. Eventually, I turned to our daughter, curiosity getting the best of me. "Did you put your doll on the kitchen table, sweetheart?" I asked casually, trying to sound indifferent. She shook her head, eyes wide and innocent. "No, Mommy, I haven't played with it since yesterday," she replied firmly. Her response left me puzzled and a bit more concerned. It seemed the mystery of the doll's journey was just beginning, leaving me with more questions than answers. At first, I thought nothing of it. Strange things happen sometimes, right? But then, odd events became more frequent. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Perhaps it was just in my head, but each strange occurrence chipped away at my calm. My mind told me it was probably nothing, yet my instincts whispered otherwise. It was hard to shrug off, especially as the strange incidents started piling up more and more. Soon I noticed the lights flickering at odd times, and our Wi-Fi started disconnecting randomly. No matter what I did, it felt like someone, or something, was watching us, even within the supposed safety of our home. At night, every creak or groan became magnified in the quiet. It made me jumpy, casting uncertain glances around. Each shadow seemed to move, making the feeling of being watched grow even stronger until it became an unsettling constant. I shared my concerns with friends, hoping they might see my point. Instead, they laughed and called me paranoid. They insisted it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. At home, my husband tried to reassure me. "It's just bad wiring," he'd say when I pointed out the odd occurrences. He wanted me to relax, but his dismissals only added to my unease. I started wondering if I really was seeing things. Then came the night when I heard soft footsteps outside our bedroom door. My heart skipping a beat, I glanced over at my husband, who was sound asleep beside me. I felt alone, grappling with the decision to investigate. Gathering my courage, I quietly slipped out of bed. Each step I took was cautious, echoing slightly in the stillness. With heightened alertness, I moved to uncover the source of the insistent footsteps. As I peeked into the dimly lit hallway, relief washed over me at the sight of our daughter. She was wandering, still half asleep. I knelt beside her, brushing back her tousled hair. "What are you doing up, sweetie?" I whispered softly. "I heard voices in my room," she murmured, eyes blinking sleepily. Her words sent a fresh wave of shivers down my spine, and I gently guided her back toward her room. Once she was tucked back into bed, I returned to my own room, feeling on edge. My mind raced, unable to settle down. The next morning, I noticed our daughter appeared unusually tired. She was quieter than usual, her playful laugh missing from the breakfast table. It was like something was weighing her down. I tried not to overthink it, but my gaze lingered on her, my mind filled with unanswered questions. Later that day, her preschool teacher called us to talk about her concerning behavior. She described her as being more tired and less engaged than normal. I shared this with my husband, and we both decided to step up. We agreed to install security cameras to monitor our home better. It felt like the right thing to do, but a small part of me worried about uncovering something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. For the next few days, my husband and I attentively reviewed the camera footage each night. Everything seemed typical, just a family going about their daily routine. Despite this, the strange happenings didn't stop. The flickering lights, the eerie sensations, they all continued unabated. Part of me hoped a perfectly logical explanation was just around the corner, but another part couldn't ignore the growing sense that we were missing something critical. Trying to reassure me, my husband promised we'd get to the bottom of it all. His words were meant to comfort, but I wished he'd pay more attention. "We'll figure it out, I promise," he'd say when the tension grew. While his assurances helped temporarily, the feeling of something being terribly wrong wouldn't leave me. It felt like a weight pressing down each day, urging us to find the answers hidden in the shadows. Despite the tensions at home, weekends were supposed to be for family time. We decided a beach day might help us reset. While I packed, our daughter rummaged around, trying to find her cherished baby doll. "Mom, where's my doll?" she asked, concern lining her young face. As I helped her search, I felt the familiar pang of unease. It was just a doll, but its disappearance felt somehow significant amidst everything else. The search for the missing doll was intense. Our daughter looked so sad without her toy. We turned the whole living room upside down trying to find it. Cushions and blankets were scattered everywhere. Finally, my husband got down on all fours and spotted something underneath the couch. "Got it," he said, pulling the doll out triumphantly. Our daughter's face lit up with happiness as she embraced her beloved toy again. At the beach, our daughter was inseparable from that baby doll. Everywhere she went, the doll went with her. As the day went on, I began to notice strangers glancing over at us. It made me feel uneasy, like we were being watched. My husband said I was imagining things, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that those glances were more than just simple curiosity. Something felt off. By this point, I was feeling a bit anxious. It was like someone was watching us all the time, keeping tabs on our every move. Despite my growing nervousness, my husband assured me it was just my mind playing tricks. "You need to relax," he suggested, trying to calm me. But his reassurances couldn't fully erase my unease. The tension in me was growing, and I couldn't just set it aside. On our way back from the beach, our daughter fell asleep in the car. I glanced back at her peaceful face and then at the doll in her arms. The sunlight hit it just right, and I noticed its eyes glinting oddly. It was so strange, like they were reflecting more light than they should. I stared at it for a moment, wondering if it was just a trick of the light. As we drove, something stranger happened. I could have sworn I saw the doll blink. My heart skipped a beat, but I laughed nervously, convincing myself it had to be my imagination. I reminded myself, dolls can't blink. Still, I decided I had to keep a closer eye on it. From then on, I promised myself to pay more attention and not dismiss any little oddities I noticed. One afternoon, as I was getting the mail, a neighbor stopped me. She mentioned seeing strangers hanging out near our house a few times recently. According to her, they'd leave as soon as my husband got home from work. Her words made my skin crawl. Why hadn't I noticed? Her observation added another layer of concern, as I wondered why anyone would be watching our home so closely. Hearing about the strangers made my heart pound with fear. As night fell, our daughter seemed restless, tossing and turning in her sleep. Her small whimpers echoed in the bedroom, keeping me on edge. When she awoke crying from another nightmare, I rushed to her side. It was clear something was bothering her deeply. This unsettling feeling was quickly creeping into every corner of our lives, making me anxious. I stayed by my daughter's side until she calmed down and fell back asleep. The next morning, she looked at me with worry. "Mommy," she said softly, "those weren't just dreams." Her words haunted me through breakfast. Was it possible that her nightmares were something more real to her? The thought was unnerving. I wanted to protect her from whatever was causing this distress and figure out what was wrong. Later on, my daughter mentioned feeling scared, like someone was always watching her. As she hugged the doll tightly, I noticed something odd. It seemed heavier than before. A chill ran through me. Could there be something inside? Meanwhile, my husband was quick to dismiss my feelings. He blamed our recent move for all my concerns, trying to keep things light. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that this wasn't right. My husband kept saying my worries were just about the move, insisting everything was fine. But I couldn't help but catch strange vibes from the doll. Its presence felt more than just a toy, and my instincts screamed to investigate further. The tension in the air was almost tangible, urging me to pay attention. It was like a puzzle that begged me to piece together the scattered, mysterious pieces. As days passed, the doll seemed to always be in line with our activities. Whether we were dinner or relaxing on the couch, it was as if its tiny eyes were watching. Curiosity got the best of me. I decided it was time to take a closer look. Picking it up, I turned it over carefully, running my fingers along its surfaces. It felt odd doing this, as if probing the unknown, but I couldn't stop myself. At dinner, I decided to bring up my concerns with my husband. Between bites of pasta, I told him how uneasy I felt about the doll. He listened, nodding slowly. "You know, I've felt something off too lately," he admitted, looking thoughtful. Despite sharing my concerns, he remained skeptical. "It might just be our imagination. I mean, look at what we're going through," he added. Still, something inside me urged that this was more. Our conversation turned quiet as we watched our daughter play with the doll at her feet, moving it around with busy little hands. Just then, a glint of something caught my eye. I squinted, trying to focus on the shiny spot at the back of the doll's head. "Hey, do you see that?" I whispered, leaning closer. He followed my gaze, and his eyes narrowed too. We knew we had to check it later. My husband voiced what I was thinking. "Maybe we should take that doll apart and see what's inside," he suggested at last. It sounded like a plan, but the thought of dismantling her favorite toy felt wrong. Plus, our daughter was still clutching it. "Not while she's watching," I replied, shaking my head. We nodded to each other, agreeing silently to wait until she was fast asleep. Our curiosity had to wait a bit longer. We decided to wait until she was sound asleep to investigate. So, that night, once she was tucked in and dreaming, we quietly tiptoed around the house. The air between us felt thick with unsaid worries as we whispered our plans. "Now's our chance," I told him, trying my best to not disturb the calm around us. Our daughter was finally asleep, and it was time to unravel the doll mystery. Quietly, my husband grabbed his tools and approached the doll with caution. It felt strange, almost like an unwanted guest had returned, sitting in the middle of our kitchen table. I watched him bring out his screwdrivers and set them up. We exchanged a nervous glance, knowing we had crossed into unfamiliar territory. The doll was no longer just a toy. It was rapidly becoming a puzzle we desperately needed to solve. The tension was almost palpable as we gathered around the kitchen table. Our patience was wearing thin, but understanding what we were dealing with became too urgent to ignore. We needed answers, and we needed them now. Each moment seemed longer than the last as our anticipation grew. I could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on us as we prepared to uncover whatever lay hidden inside this mysterious baby doll. We set the doll carefully on the kitchen table. I held my breath as my husband found the right tool and began to unscrew the back panel just like he'd promised. I tried to remain calm, though my heartbeat quickened with each twist of his hand. "Careful," I reminded him needlessly, my eyes diving between the tiny screws in his focused face, hoping for neither an intricate mess nor a terrible revelation. With a gentle but firm motion, my husband pried open the back of the doll. We gasped in disbelief at what we saw, a mess of tangled wires and an odd assortment of electronic parts. It was nothing we had expected. I shook my head, bewildered by the sight inside her toy. He looked at me, incredulous, sharing the same shock. This was far from the harmless plaything we thought it was. Buried within the doll's back was a tiny lens, staring directly back at us. My husband's complexion took on a ghostly hue as he processed what we were seeing. The reality of the situation clicked in terrifying clarity. I stood there, stunned, feeling the blood drain from my face again. Just like that, the doll's unsettling presence in our life snapped into focus, leaving us to grapple with what we'd discovered. The doll's tiny lens seemed to stare right at us, making the moment feel frozen in time. My heart pounded as I looked at my husband, silently asking what on earth we should do next. We both realized the enormity of what we had found. There was no going back. Whatever was happening was beyond our worst fears. Standing there, we convinced each other that we had to find some answers, no matter how difficult it might be. We spent what felt like hours searching for information, but came up short. Google searches, calls to tech-savvy friends, anything that might help. Still, none of it explained why a doll would contain such technology. With each passing moment, unease crept in deeper, and security for our family became an even bigger concern. Questions swirled in my mind with no clear answers. Our next step was hazy, but it was clear something had to be done. Feeling lost, we decided it was time to seek professional help. After a quick conversation, my husband and I agreed that bringing in an expert might be the only way to uncover the truth behind this mystery. We couldn't waste any more time. It was a difficult call to make, admitting to someone just how bizarre everything was, but we knew it was necessary if we wanted to understand what we were facing. Later that night, we made a decision. Disconnecting from the network and packing a few bags, we decided to leave our home temporarily. Staying with family felt like the safest option. In hushed tones, we explained to our daughter that we'd be going on a little trip. She seemed excited, but the tension between my husband and me spoke volumes. We both knew why we were doing this. It wasn't an adventure, but a precaution. Away from home, I thought I'd find peace, but unease clung to me like a shadow. We contacted local police, hoping their intervention would be swift. Unfortunately, they were skeptical, telling us that no laws, as of yet, appeared broken. It felt dismissive, like we were just imagining it all. Without tangible evidence and with their doubts echoing in my mind, we realized our journey to understand needed more than just calling the authorities. Meeting with a detective, we presented everything, every worry, every strange occurrence. Perhaps it wasn't enough for immediate action, since he implied there might be nothing harmful about our discovery. His words felt like a brush-off, leaving us with more questions than solutions. The implications of what we found, though subtle in evidence, loomed large in our minds. We knew it was more than just our imagination, but proving it was another matter altogether. Determined not to accept the detective's conclusion, I began researching online about hidden cameras. The more I read, the greater my dread grew. With pages and pages of technical jargon and disturbing stories, I felt overwhelmed. Doubts crept in. Was this really the right direction? Meanwhile, my husband stood by my side, offering comfort, but even he knew the underlying truth. We were far from being safe and needed answers now more than ever. Every article I came across fed my growing fear. It was hard to stay calm when it seemed like we were just a part of something bigger. My husband tried to comfort me, holding me close, but even he felt the weight of our uncertain safety. Despite his comforting words, we both understood that this discovery required immediate action. Without those necessary answers, our lives felt more unpredictable, and our nights became sleepless. Determined to find what we were searching for, we decided necessity called for drastic measures. We realized we couldn't rely on those around us and had to take this investigation into our own hands. Our family's safety was on the line. Convincing each other that we'd figure this out ourselves gave us the push we needed. We couldn't wait around for someone else to fix it. Action had to start with us. Late at night, determined to find answers, we scoured the internet once again. My husband suddenly exclaimed, startling us both from our focus. He found stories similar to ours. Others had shared experiences about supposed children's toys equipped with hidden equipment. Our breakthrough shone a light on our situation, but it was also a realization of the danger lurking in our lives. We knew then we'd have to be extra vigilant moving forward. After doing some digging, we realized we weren't the first family to discover something strange inside a toy. Reports from other families surfaced, revealing they'd found peculiar things inside their children's toys as well. My husband and I exchanged a concerned look, realizing this wasn't just a freak incident. Maybe someone else out there knew more about what was happening, and we needed to connect with them to figure out what to do next. We turned to online forums, desperate for advice. I typed out a detailed post, explaining our situation and asking for any insights or similar stories. Replies came flooding in. Some people seemed genuinely concerned, offering suggestions on what to do. Others seemed skeptical, questioning if it was all a misunderstanding. Nonetheless, it felt good to know we weren't isolated. We weren't quite sure whom to believe, but at least people were listening. We realized there was no time to waste. My heart raced as we discussed our game plan. Thankfully, my husband remembered a tech expert he'd met through work. This expert had a reputation for solving all kinds of technical puzzles. We decided to reach out. It was a relief to think someone with real knowledge could help unravel the tangled threads of our bizarre situation, pointing us toward a solution. Our spirits lifted when the expert agreed to come over and assist us. Finally, it seemed like we had a direction to go in. I felt a spark of hope when we set the plans in motion. It was time to tackle this thing head on, with someone who knew what they were doing at the helm. Together, we could make sense of this mess and come up with answers that eluded us before. When the expert arrived, they greeted us warmly, immediately putting us at ease. They spoke with confidence, offering tips on best practices for safeguarding our household. This included basics like changing Wi-Fi passwords and checking other toys. It seemed simple, yet it gave us a sense of control. We suddenly felt like we had a bit of a grip on an otherwise bewildering situation and hoped to resolve this strange ordeal soon. With expert precision, they began to dismantle the doll, inch by inch. My husband and I watched with bated breath, as it felt like our entire reality hinged on what they might find. Their calm demeanor reassured us, making us believe that together we could handle whatever was inside. It wasn't long before signs of hidden equipment within the doll's walls confirmed our worst fears, shifting our focus to the next steps. The expert paused, looked up, and nodded. "This isn't the first I've seen like this," they explained, confirming our fears. Across the country, other families had stumbled upon similar setups, making it a chilling trend. Knowing this didn't make the situation any less daunting, but it helped us realize we were not isolated. The bigger picture was starting to form, showing us our ordeal was a part of something widespread and unnerving. Understanding we were specifically targeted sent chills down my spine. Why our family? The expert advised on immediate measures to strengthen our home's security, involving everything from altering routines to upgrading locks. While we couldn't know who was behind it or why they chose us, these recommended steps helped us feel a little more secure. Despite the surreal severity of it all, knowing we could fortify our defenses was reassuring. Meanwhile, our daughter watched, puzzled by all the adult activity. I knew it was time to talk to her. Sitting down, I gently explained that while the doll seemed broken, it was important to her safety. Her eyes wide, she nodded solemnly. It wasn't easy, but she understood as much as a child could. We wanted to make sure she felt safe, even if she didn't fully grasp what was truly going on. From that day forward, our lives had a new focus on security. My husband kept a close eye on the neighborhood, attentively noting unusual activities. Our home became a fortress, with every system upgraded and every door secured with extra care. It felt like strengthening our safety net was the least we could do until we found out exactly what was going on. It was a strange comfort, but crucial nonetheless. As the weeks went by, the tension in our home began to fade. The changes we made slowly paid off, and we started feeling safe again. My husband and I found some peace in knowing we'd taken the right steps to protect our family. With each passing day, the fear's grip on our lives loosened, giving us the comfort we so desperately needed. Then, finally, clarity emerged from the haze that had clouded our world. One late evening, just as we were settling in, the phone rang. Picking it up, we listened intently as our contact revealed some crucial details. The doll's origins traced back to mysterious sellers known for their secrecy. It appeared we had been in possession of something far more complex than a mere child's toy. It was unsettling to know there was still so much we didn't fully understand about what we were dealing with. Our contact explained that the people behind the doll specialized in selling surveillance toys, designed to keep tabs on entire households. The realization hit us hard, adding another layer of concern to our situation. Even more chilling was the news that the device had been actively transmitting information to a nearby location. Knowing this, we felt an urgent need to take action and ensure our daughter's safety moving forward. When I heard that the doll was transmitting to a local address, my blood turned cold. The thought that our daughter was never truly alone while playing with it was terrifying. It was as if a stranger had been quietly invading our home through the guise of innocence. And that idea made my heart race with fear and anger. We understood the situation required immediate action and would stop at nothing to protect our child. With renewed purpose, we reached out to the police once more, urging them to look into our strange findings. This time, they took us more seriously, showing interest in our claims. Their attention was a relief, as local authorities swiftly organized a raid on the suspect's premises. It was an opportunity to bring an end to our torment, and we held on to the hope that we were finally turning the tide towards safety. In an immense wave of relief, we learned that the police successfully apprehended those responsible. We couldn't contain our emotions as we hugged each other tightly, savoring the warmth of our family's safety. Our daughter was back in our arms, smiling brightly. And for the first time in weeks, the tension lifted. Knowing the culprits were caught filled us with gratitude and the promise of returning to our normal lives. This frightening experience taught us to prioritize our family above all else. We came to understand the importance of being vigilant, keeping a watchful eye on the things that seemed out of place. Though the ordeal had shaken us deeply, the peace of knowing the truth set our hearts at ease. It was a fresh start, a chance to embrace new priorities with lessons learned and hold on to what truly matters. Armed with the knowledge of what really happened, we could finally let go of our fears. The truth had set us free, allowing life to return to normal bit by bit. Though some days were harder than others, we took comfort in the mundane. Cherished moments like breakfast together meant everything. Our daughter deserved a life untouched by past shadows, and we were ready to embrace the light as one unified family. Slowly but surely, our daughter's laughter filled our home once more, and the mysterious doll faded into a distant memory. The joy of spending time together felt sacred, reinforcing the bond between us. We welcomed each giggle as a sign of normalcy returning, a constant reminder of what we'd fought hard to preserve. It was a new start, assuring us that no matter the challenges, family was a haven where warmth and love thrived. Even after the harrowing ordeal, we found that we'd emerged stronger, more united as a family. It hadn't been easy, but together we'd faced and overcame great odds. Our home, once a place of uncertainty, now glowed with newfound peace and reassurance. It seemed no matter what came our way, we'd tackle it head-on, supporting each other every step. Our journey reminded us that home was truly where safety and belonging awaited us forever.